Cale's breath caught, a shiver running along his spine as the thread wrapped gently around him and Myra, anchoring them both to the pod. It was not a chain, not a binding, but a recognition, an acknowledgement from something vast and unseen. The faint shimmer spread across the square, connecting the edges of the lattice like threads stitching the air itself. Myra's hand brushed against his again, subtle, grounding. "It's responding," she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear but with awe. "It knows we're here." "Yes," Cale murmured, eyes tracing the faint, golden threads that danced and coiled in the air. Each movement of theirs, each shift of attention, caused a subtle ripple through the lattice. The pods pulsed in reply, some quickening their rhythm, others still hesitant, gauging, testing, inviting. The stranger's gaze lingered on them, calm, precise. "This is the first step," he said, voice low but commanding attention. "Do not touch yet. The pods are patient. They will respond in their own time to those who are ready. The first thread is the test of perception, of awareness, of willingness to see beyond self." Cale's chest tightened with the weight of it, willingness to see beyond himself. That was the test. Not strength, not courage, not knowledge. Just attention, recognition, connection. The golden thread quivered, brightening for a heartbeat before fading slightly, as though waiting for a conscious choice. Cale exhaled, letting go of expectation, letting the lattice guide his awareness rather than forcing it. He felt the thread pulse again, tentatively, then stronger, like a heartbeat syncing with his own. Myra leaned closer, sensing the same rhythm, her eyes reflecting the shimmer as if she could see into the very essence of the pod. The lattice acknowledged them, not just as observers, but as participants, as potential threads woven into its vast, conscious fabric. Cale looked back at the stranger. "We're ready?" The stranger inclined his head, a faint curve of approval. "Ready enough. Now the lattice will begin to teach. Watch, listen, and learn. Let it show you its first secret." The square seemed to exhale, and the hum deepened, resonant, alive. The first thread had been claimed, not taken, not forced, but recognized. And in that recognition, Cale and Myra had stepped into something far larger than themselves, a current of memory and possibility stretching across centuries. The dreaming had begun. The hum of the pod swelled around them. It was no longer subtle, no longer just a pulse. It became a tide, wrapping them in its rhythm and pulling them inward. Cale's chest tightened as the lattice stretched. Threads brushed against every thought, brushing against every memory, brushing against every hidden corner of awareness. He felt the edges of himself dissolve. Not entirely, but enough that the world outside, the square, the ruined streets, the waiting crowd, faded into distant, indistinct shapes. Myra's hand found his, grounding him, steadying him, even as the pod seemed to breathe with a life of its own. "Are you ready?" she whispered, her voice trembling and steady at once. Cale nodded, though the motion felt unnecessary. The lattice had already claimed them. There was no turning back. The interior of the pod shifted, light folded into itself. Colors spiraled and unfolded in impossible geometries. Threads of past and future, memory and possibility, coiled around them like living vines. Cale felt himself lifted, almost weightless, yet tethered, every nerve and thought resonating with the lattice. A whisper, faint but insistent, brushed against his mind. "Welcome, you have arrived." He gasped, blinking. The dreaming was not a place. It was not a time. It was a state, a web, a consciousness. Cale and Myra were no longer merely perceiving. They were part of it. Their threads were woven into the lattice's vast, trembling network, and every pulse, every shimmer of light, every flicker of color carried meaning. Visions began to bloom around him. Cities unbuilt, streets that never existed. People moved in patterns that defied logic, yet felt intimate, inevitable. Myra leaned close, her breath brushing his shoulder. Cale realized she was seeing differently, yet in perfect sync, threads overlapping, harmonizing, a duet of perception. This is the dreaming," he whispered. His voice rippled, refracting through the threads, becoming both part of the lattice and separate, a new kind of presence. The stranger's voice now echoed from somewhere inside the lattice itself. carrying weight and authority. You have entered what is remembered and what is imagined. Here the threads are endless. Here what you perceive shapes what exists. Step carefully, see clearly, and remember, the dreaming is alive, and it watches all who enter. Cale exhaled, a mixture of awe and fear flooding him. He glanced at Myra. She smiled faintly, eyes reflecting the impossible geometries spiraling around them. Together they had crossed the threshold, not just into a pod, not just into a lattice, but into a living, breathing dreaming, and it had begun to respond. The square throbbed with movement, every step of the crowd echoing like a tide that would not turn back. People pressed forward, eyes glazed, bodies half given to the hum of the pods. Leora stayed at the edge, back against the crumbling stone of the library wall. She clutched the shard of mirror so tightly it cut into her palm. The sting reminded her she was still here, still awake. She watched as neighbors, strangers, even the boy with the tattered notebook vanished one by one into the pod's seamless curves. The hum deepened. It was no longer a sound but a weight pressing against her ribs. The air itself leaned toward the pods, as if the city exhaled its last breath into them. Her heart ached to follow, to give in to whatever dream waited beyond. But the thought of stepping inside filled her with a heavier dread than the collapse itself. "Witnessing is resistance," she whispered. The words steadied her. Not everyone was meant to enter. Some had to stay behind, not to survive perhaps, but to remember. The crowd thinned. One pod closed, then another, until the square stood quiet. The hum settled into a low, steady vibration. A final pod sealed with a sigh. Silence fell. Leora was alone. The city stretched around her, broken and empty. Her pulse beat in her ears like a counterpoint to the hum. She pressed the shard of mirror to her chest and turned away from the pods. But as she moved, the shard flickered. Only once, but she caught more than her reflection. A boy's voice, distant but clear. "Together," it said. Then a glimpse, Cale's outline, hand reaching into a lattice of shifting light. Myra beside him, half shadow, half radiance. Threads of geometry spun around them, a web alive with memory and possibility. The image was gone in a blink. The shard became dull again in her trembling hand. Leora's breath caught. The pods had taken them, but they hadn't vanished completely. The dreaming was not sealed to her, not yet. "If they forget," she whispered, steadier this time, "then I will remember." And with that she stepped back into the ruins, the last witness of the waking world, carrying a shard of the dreaming's truth in her hand. The golden thread widened as they walked, stretching into a corridor of light. It was no longer a single strand but a woven path that was shimmering beneath their feet. It seemed to be carrying them forward through shifting patterns of the dreaming. All around them fragments drifted. Some were broken moments or unfinished places. Some were echoes of things that might have been. A staircase leading nowhere. A tree with roots sinking into a sky of molten glass. The laughter of children that was cut short by silence. Cale's stomach tightened. "It feels wrong," he murmured. "Like everything's waiting for us to decide if it stays or fades." "That's the weaving," Myra whispered. Her eyes were fixed on the fragments, seeing each one glowing faintly, hungry to be chosen. "We don't just walk through the dreaming, we shape what survives." A low hum trembled through the air. Threads writhed ahead of them. They were tangling into a knot of pulsing light. The corridor ended at the snarl that was glowing with a dangerous intensity. Cale stepped closer, his heart pounding. The knot wasn't just threads, it was memories. He could feel them pressing against his mind as thousands of voices clamoring for release. A battlefield blurred with smoke. A cradle rocking in an empty room, hands raised in farewell. Myra gasped. She gripped his arm. "It's a convergence. Too many threads pulled together without being chosen. If we leave it, it'll collapse and take us with it." The figure's words returned to him. "To walk deeper, you must learn to weave." Cale clenched his fists. "So we pick what lives and what's forgotten." The knot shivered, its threads flickering wildly, as though it had heard him. Images surged. A child's face. A ship caught in storm. The whisper of a name he almost recognized. Mara shook her head, eyes blazing. "Not just pick. We have to weave them together. Balance them so none are destroyed." The knot pulsed harder, its glow intensifying into a painful brilliance. Time was running thin. Cale met her gaze, and for a moment the world went still. Then we weave, he said. Together they reached toward the snarled threads. At once the memories poured into them. They were blinding, endless, and demanding. Cale staggered, but Myra's grip held him firm. Their minds moved as one, their fingers brushing through light, pulling fragments together. A lullaby merged with the roar of the sea, a soldier's farewell folded into a child's first step. Broken images found resonance, weaving into a pattern neither of them fully understood, but felt. The knot softened, untangling beneath their touch. Threads aligned, glowing brighter, until the chaos transformed into a single tapestry of gold and silver light. The corridor reformed, steady beneath their feet. The dreaming seemed to sigh with relief. Cale collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. That was more than I thought possible. Myra's hand lingered on his shoulder, her own face pale but shining. It was only possible because we did it together. Ahead, the golden path stretched on, brighter now, leading into deeper mysteries. Behind them, the figure's voice echoed faintly, though no form appeared. You have begun the weaving, but remember, every choice leaves an echo.